Figured
All
it
right. So welcome back to the Getting Committed podcast. This time we're joined with Harry Rosenholtz. Harry has a background that extends more years than I've been alive in the game of hockey and in women's hockey alone. However, Harry, comes from a background of coaching at Qunnipiac, coaching at Yale, working with the NWHL when I first started. Now he heads up CHS, and just what I know of Harry, he's probably had a hand in over 1,000 girls at least playing Division I hockey in some capacity. And now he's coaching the national team for Spain and heading up their development. And, he's spearheading the successes coming out of a country that wasn't necessarily regarded a hockey hotbed, but now is definitely on the map within IHF. Outside of that, I know he's dabbled as well, working with the Japanese national team. And if you look at the Japanese development, what they're doing right now, especially the younger age groups in the U16 and U18, is pretty impressive. So we're pretty excited to have Harry here because, what he knows about college even from the D1 level at Ivy to all the way down to D3 and everything in between, he's done it, he's seen it all, and he knows everyone. And so that's so I'll give
Well, there's no way I can live up to any of that, Sam.
Yeah, I'll throw it over to you now. So again, just talk like, you grew up in New York a little bit, and hockey's a bit different. So what made you start doing hockey? And
Well, actually, I think I was a born coach. I can remember when I was in high school volunteering to coach Little League baseball. So I've always loved that dynamic. I've loved helping to teach and see kids grow and develop, and I like winning. So all those things sort of contributed to my desire to coach. And then when I got into hockey, my coaching really started when I was coaching my boys. I have two boys, and they both played hockey, and I ended up coaching them from mites all the way through midgets. And we had some success there, and it was a lot of fun. For you parents who are parent coaches, I do recognize all the challenges that are involved with that. And for the kids who have parents as coaches, you'll live through that miserable experience. I can assure you.
Yeah. So you grew up, this is in Connecticut now, right?
Well, I grew up on Long Island.
Okay.
And played a little bit of hockey there, not a whole lot. Then I went to play hockey in my school in Cleveland. I went to a school in Cleveland, Ohio, played a little bit of hockey there. But I've always been a passionate hockey fan.
Yeah.
I've always been involved in learning about the game and following it. And I can remember, actually, I helped pay my way through college by creating a board game, which is a dice game in those days. And I had my entire dormitory playing it during finals week. So it was pretty cool.
There you go. Nice. So, let's kind of fast forward a little bit after coaching your son's team, and then your first endeavor was with Yale, I believe, in the college scene.
Yep.
So this is back in what, 2000?
That was 1999.
Okay. Yeah.
And I can remember getting a call from the head coach of Yale, and he said, "Hey, I hear you're doing some good things. I need an assistant coach. I'd like you to come talk to me." So I went there, had a little bit of an interview. We seemed to get along okay. He said, "Hey, but I need you to talk to my two goalies because I'm going to have you work with my goalies." So I talked with the goalies, and I guess they didn't hate it. So they went back to him and said, "Okay, this guy's okay." And then I met with the coach again, and he said, "Okay, great, you're hired." And I said, "Well, what does that mean?" He said, "Yeah, you're my new volunteer assistant." So I volunteered, and I learned a lot from the very get-go. And those days, Yale was terrible. I should say they probably my first year they won 3 games. Against all Division III teams. So at one point, the athletic director came to me and said, "Harry, what can we do with this program?" And I said, "Well, what do you mean? Like, why are we even playing Division III teams? Like, let's go. Let's get me out there, and I'll start recruiting kids."
Yeah.
So in the first year, they actually had real trouble getting kids in above the academic index, which is something the Ivy Leagues do as far as maintaining a certain level of academic excellence throughout the school, throughout the league. And so they sent me out. They paid me $1,000 for the whole year. And they sent me out and they said, okay, go find some kids. And I went out, and luckily, towards the very, very end of the cycle, I'm talking about in March or February, I was able to get these two girls from Edmonton to commit to Yale. They got admitted, and the rest is history. From that point on, we started our slow climb. Within in my third year, we actually were over 500. We had a 16-12 record in the third year. So that was pretty quick, pretty rapid development. And I'm still proud of those kids because they all came with the right attitude and and things like that. Before then, literally, we hadn't beaten Brown in 18 years. And we hadn't beaten Cornell in 30 straight games.
So was the ECAC league as it is now, that was still around back then, or was it different?
Well, actually, my second year was the first year the ECAC formed and had playoffs.
Okay.
So that was really the beginning of that league.
Yeah.
As it were.
So like if we look forward now to 2020 and look what Yale did this past season under Mark, what's the difference between back then and now, do you think? Like, what's the biggest?
Well, I mean, the entire women's hockey world has changed. It's much more serious.
Yeah.
Thankfully, the coaches are getting paid these days, and they're making a living coaching as they deserve to. So I think the game itself has taken on a gravity that is reflected in the recruiting world.
Yeah.
But in general, the level of play has gotten so much better and deeper. In those days, literally, when I first started recruiting, I think we went to 3 showcases the whole year. And that, 2 tournaments and a showcase, something like that. Today, obviously, there are so many showcases that are available.
Yeah. And where were the players coming from back then? Or was it just a kind of a hotbed where it was like, I think the other day I watched Miracle again, and it was Minnesota and Massachusetts kind of thing. Is that the same kind of thing back then for the girls, like 20 years ago? And now are you seeing players coming from all over the place?
In those days, it was almost exclusively Canadian and American kids. Minnesota, Massachusetts, Michigan were hotbeds in the U.S. In Canada, it was the Toronto, Mississauga area, Brampton, and then a few hotbeds out west. There is still a school called Notre Dame in Wilcox, Saskatchewan, one of my favorite places on the planet. And it has a town of 300 people, and everybody there is involved in hockey. And at one point, I think they had, if I'm not mistaken, 6 female hockey teams.
Wow.
So going to Wilcox for a tournament was really an adventure, really an exciting thing. And they used to have something called the Western Shield, which was the best teams from the 4 Western conferences, Western provinces. And so that was a recruiting trip, and it was a lot of fun.
Nice. So moving on a little bit from Yale and going to Qunnipiac, because I think there's 2 schools there which are very close proximity but are completely different. Obviously, one's an Ivy and just from an academic standpoint, but also from a hockey standpoint.
Yeah.
I think Qunnipiac, was it this year or was it Merrimack? One of them. I know Qunnipiac went to Belfast recently for that Belfast tournament. That was Qunnipiac, right? So like, what's the difference? Like, do you see? Obviously, it's different back then, but obviously, I'm sure a lot of things still overlap in time. So, what was the biggest difference going from Yale to Qunnipiac, and what do you see the differences in the schools when people are looking at them?
Well, look, I think the academic thing played a heavy role in the limitations that Yale had in those days. For instance, I can remember when I had my first admissions meeting with my dean at Yale, and he basically said, "Look, you're always going to be 1 player short. Meaning, if you're a good coach, you can still win, but we're not going to help you." Essentially, today that's changed. I think Yale, the mentality has changed. All right. I think even during my time there, the mentality changed. Now it became about, being successful, putting a representative team on the ice. You know, Quinnipiac, obviously it's not an Ivy League. It's a scholarship school, so they're able to offer full rides to talented players. And I can remember that in our first year, I mean, when we first got there, again, our first year we were 3-26, and however, 3-26-9. All right. So the culture when we first got there was really scary. It was pretty dreadful. So we had to do sort of a quick renovation. So in my first year, we graduated 3 girls, and we brought in 11.
Okay. Yeah.
And the next year, we graduated 3 girls, and we brought in 11. So the key thing about that for people that are looking at these rosters today and saying, well, they're only graduating 2D, it's not always the way it looks. All right. Coaches have different imperatives. They have different needs. So don't go strictly by the rosters. All right. And don't give up because you're seeing that they only are graduating 2D and you're a D. All right. You want to, and you want to continue to dialogue with these schools as much as you possibly can, as much as they're willing to dialogue with you.
Yeah, and I think that's a really big important point, because just even in our own program this year, we had 4 girls injured, like season-ending injuries. We had 2 girls at the start of the year, came in September, didn't play a single game for us. So
Right.
and that also happens. That's just from the youth level, but that also happens at college level a lot as well.
Oh, yeah, for
And
sure.
and colleges and coaches are always changing, right? There's always every year the coaches are moving somewhere else, and like if you can look at it and just be like, people are bouncing around. So
Yeah.
people always want a different idea and that thing.
And I
So
can tell you from the recruiting side, when we start talking about the recruiting side, one of the things kids today need to know is it's never too early to get started if you're doing it right. And it's never too late. There are things happening now because of transfer, because of the transfer portal. There's all kinds of movement happening. There's coaches that are decommitting to kids. There are kids that are decommitting to coaches late in the game. So things happen. The key part is to stay with it, to be persistent, and to show them that that's one of your character traits, right?
yeah, no. So that kind of moves on to CHS, and something that you've been running now, what, 9?
This will be our 9th year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Our 8th year in Florida.
yep.
And by the way, we are rescheduling, or we have rescheduled now. So we're going to do Florida as long as the CDC allows us to, and the local officials and all the health people give us the okay. So now we're going to be doing that from August 18th to the 22nd.
And in Florida, right?
Florida, in Fort Myers, just the way it's always been.
Nice. And I think that's just right before the season starts as well, and
Yeah,
before
it's
Red
going to
Day.
be good. And we've added a second one now just to give people some flexibility.
Yeah.
And that's in St. Louis at the new practice facility for the St. Louis Blues. And that's going to be August 14th to the 16th.
Yeah.
All right. And one of the reasons we're doing that is because a lot of the institutional camps, the camps on college campuses, are going to be canceled this year.
Yeah.
So the coaches are coming to us and saying, Harry, what can we do to go see players? Where can we go? What's the best sort of situation that we can find ourselves in? And of course, the kids are going to be scrambling too, because they need to be seen. All right. And there's going to be a lot of activity later, hopefully later in the summer, if the virus allows us to. So, by the way, I hope everybody's staying safe.
Yeah. It's definitely something that's thrown the hockey world in a spin. Recently I'm working with a player here who's trying to get drafted this year, and what happens with the NHL, and if they cancel the draft, and then he's still trying to stay in shape, because if he gets drafted, then there might be development camps straight after the draft and everything else. So it's definitely thrown the world of hockey in a spin, but it's thrown it even more so on the girls' side, because there's spots still open for this September.
Yeah, there are.
And it's, and if those players who normally get picked up this time of year.
In fact, we did a survey recently of some of the college coaches, and we asked them, hey, if you still need players, let us know. So if there are kids out there that are looking for this September, believe it or not, there is still a lot of spaces available. So they can write to me, harry@collegehockeyshowcases.com. All right, and I'll respond to everybody, and I'll give them all the data from which schools are looking for what.
Yeah, I think that's really, really important. That's really such a great and valuable resource for players. And again, this is trying to get those players who feel probably, I guess, lost and feel like they've been, hard done by what's going on, and feel like, they're thrown in the spin. But what can you do to?
Well, Sam, to tout you a little bit, you're doing such a great job of getting kids ready, keeping them physically ready, talking about stuff that we're going to be talking about as far as recruiting. This isn't what you're doing is really invaluable for a lot of these girls, especially.
Yeah, I hope so. We'll see. So yeah, let's talk more about CHS. So I think a lot of people. My first experience of CHS was obviously the Sweden camp last year, and going into it blind and not knowing what it was or necessarily the talent level and just what the camp could be. From the outside looking in, there's not a lot of you know things from it from last year. I was trying to look up like, where are we going? What is this? Where is it? But once you get there, it's phenomenal because one, the players, the caliber of the players there are just like everyone plays for their national team. Majority of the players,
Yeah.
You have players. I think it was from 26 countries overall.
25. Yeah, last year.
Yeah, your girls coming from Australia, has been on the plane for a day and a half to get there. You've got players who are 2007 who played like a 2004, 2003. You have girls who are, in college as counselors who can give that thing. And then, the main thing from a coaching standpoint was just, there was two things. Like, there's no drama. Like, the players all like get on with each other. Like, no one, and they're all there to work hard. And then from a coaching standpoint, you really got to understand the players in every single aspect. And it took about a day or so for everyone to get to know each other. But I think the way that the camp runs, you're working so intimately with the players in different aspects. You get to see every single facet of them. You get to see, when they get tired. You get to see what their limitations are. You get to see them push past that very quickly.
So that's why we did it. Okay, and the truth is, we've had such success for kids getting recruited from that camp, and you've touched on it. Okay, the reason is coaches get to spend a week, sometimes 2 weeks, getting to know kids. They have lunch with them, they have breakfast with them, they have snacks with them, they work with them on the ice, off the ice. They get to see, they get to really get an idea of who these kids are, and it's obviously very attractive to to the coaches. They push them. The camp in Sweden, we ask our coaches to push them, right? Everybody comes to that camp because they will get better. We've seen kids. You remember the girl from Italy last year? I won't name names, but in the 2 weeks that she was there,
A-bomb, yep, just unreal, yeah.
She went from a marginal D3 player to a kid in the end of the second week that D1 coaches were saying, "Hey, I'm going to follow that kid."
Yeah.
So that's the magic. So we're pushing them. They're getting more ice time and more off ice instruction, both physically and also through classroom stuff and video. Then they would get their entire year. So it's really it's a really great atmosphere. Like you said, everybody buys in. There's no drama. Everybody's there for a purpose, and so it's been very successful. We've had 75 plus girls get recruited in the last 3 years of the camp. And what's amazing about that is we only have 65 or 70 kids a week.
Yeah.
So it's a pretty high percentage. But more than that, kids are going to places where they find a good fit. And that's my ethic. That's something that I really care about for the kids.
Yeah, no, and I think it's the friendships that these kids bond as well, and just coming away from the camp, and I still speak to a lot of the girls, right? Like, even Millie and Martina played for us this year, and just having that still kind of that understanding, that relationship with the players, and the respect that everyone has for one another is such a great thing. Like, I was just speaking to Julia Zelensky the other day and just giving her some workouts she can do at home,
Right.
while she's cooped up because she's still in Finland and not going back and I think from a player standpoint, I always talk about, yes, there's the exposure question and everything else, but what this camp really provides is you're playing against the best in the world, right? Like if we just talk about the U16, Youth Olympics game, there was what? It was Japan v Sweden, 11 of them or 12 of them were in the final who were at the camp. What?
Exactly.
12 or 11 of the U18 Swedish girls were at the camp, from the national team. So if you're a player and you think that, hey, I think I'm a Division I player, this is basically a place for you to go and kind of test
But I
yourself
also
against.
I don't want kids to be scared to come if they
No,
don't feel
absolutely,
that
yeah.
they're at that level yet, because here's the bottom line. At that age, okay, it's all about development. All
Yeah,
right. And all I care about is that someone is making a commitment to themselves to get better.
yeah.
Right. If they are there to work, get better, have some fun, because it's a fun camp. But if they're there to get better, then I'm happy. And again, we've seen so much improvement. Sam, we could talk all day about recruitment, getting recruited, things like that. There's nothing that we can do as to help these kids more than helping them get better.
Yeah.
If they get better, then they have a better chance of getting recruited.
Well, that's always the equation I look at, right? I always look at, like, if you have really good coaching, that's number one, and I think you tick that box. You have good opportunities for the players to get looked at, number two, and the third is to get better. You've got to be in an environment that has better players than you, right? And I think that regardless if you're an incoming freshman last year and you're going to college, or you're previously still you were, let's take Nadia, who was a counselor, right? She was going into school, she still got better, or Alva still got better, right? Then
Right.
take Tabea, she'd already been at Yale, still got better, right? All those counselors alone got better. Then you look at the players who are still get prep school or still in their youth programs, were still getting better, right? There was more levels to it than just everyone being the same. And I think,
But also for the campers to see the counselors be that committed,
yeah,
and understand the work ethic, and understand the level that it's going to take to be successful at the D1 level and beyond on a national team level. That's pretty valuable for a lot of kids.
yeah, no, I think so. So let's talk a little bit now. You touched on it about recruitment and talked about, girls getting committed from the camp and everything else. So, and obviously you've played a hand in not just what you've done with CHS, but every other thing outside of that as well, in consulting or just conversations you've had. You probably had over 1,000 players that in some way have come from you and got committed and played hockey. So what do you see? Like I talk about it with Nick and Taylor and a few other people. What do you see as like a big thing that players are making a mistake right now? Like, what is the thing that they're not doing, and what's something that they could be doing very easily? From especially when we got more downtime and coaches are definitely scrambling and trying to think.
Well, look, I think there's a couple of things. I think that Nick and Taylor both touched on, the fact that they want kids who are specifically interested in their schools. So I always tell kids, make it about the coaches. Don't make it about you. Make it about them, their schools, their programs, their coaching ability, things like that, that really indicate that you've done your homework about the school, that you've looked at a lot of options, and the reason you're communicating with them is specific because of this, this, and this. All right. The more specific, the better your chances of making a connection will be, without a doubt.
Yeah.
All right.
So
So
what are some mistakes then? If, like, we talked a bit like canvassing, print, like copy and pasting the same email, or it could be like, I
well,
know
yeah,
I have a player who, I've talked to her a lot about it. She's been sending countless emails in the hundreds,
wrong. That's a
and
mistake.
right, so hundreds of emails constantly, and yes, you're showing you're passionate, but why is she sending those emails? And I know she's not the only player probably doing that. And how could she have a
Yeah, I
better
mean,
strategy?
coaches after a while they get bombshelled, right? They're like, can I go in a bunker and hide from this kid? Yeah, you only write to coaches when there's a significant development. Hey, coach, I just got picked, or I got invited for the Ontario under 16 tryouts, or coach, I just made my provincial team. You know, things that are specific hockey developments. That's what you should be communicating to the coaches.
Yep.
I think that's one thing for sure.
All right. So, and then I think a lot of people, I know when I'm talking to players and, and they're asking me what they should be doing, how would you go about talking to a player about creating a list? Right. And the way
That's
I
the
look,
biggest mistake. All
yeah,
right. I think the biggest mistake kids make today is in self-evaluating. Right. A lot of kids are mid-range Division III players, and they're writing to Wisconsin, Minnesota, Clarkson, BU, all the top schools,
yeah,
and then they wait because those schools are never going to be answering them, or they're going to be getting a form letter. So the bottom line is, it all starts with being realistic and and understanding who you are as a hockey player. Now that doesn't mean that you can't be a great fourth line player for one of the top teams, all right, if you show the right kinds of attributes and if that's truly what you want to do. All right, but I think it's really important to start to get a handle on evaluating yourself, getting people to help you evaluate. If people want to send me video, all right, you can send it to me and I'll give you some feedback, honest feedback. And I think that it's extremely helpful. I know parents all over the world are looking for that kind of feedback. So believe it or not, if you want to send me 3 minutes, please, no more than 3 minutes, I can provide you with some feedback.
yeah. No, I think that's again another thing that's so fantastic. Um, but then if we do, so I'll just give you an example. I've got a lot of the players that I've coached. They will come to me and they'll say, "Sam, here's our list," right? And a lot of it is directed to the parents as well. And I think the parents play a massive part of this.
Of course,
In
you should.
the Europeans, we don't really have any alumni association with a school or care if the school is a Big Ten, or we have any idea what an ECAC is, or we probably heard of the Ivies, and that's basically it. So we're not really caring if like, hey, Lindenwood are going to offer this girl, a full ride, or there's something else. So there's nothing really, that's the European, but in the US, it's a little bit different, and the parents are driving the bus a lot more. So what would you say to, and I always talk about it as well. And I say, you probably heard it in the other podcast when personally, I'm a city person. I couldn't go and live in Clarkson or Potsdam, up that area. Like I would go stir crazy. And it's, and I tell players straight away, like, what are you as a person? Right? Because hockey is going to, again, suck at some stage. And everyone has that. And regardless of where you are, if you're in the NHL, the SDHL, the SHL, whatever league it is, hockey is going to suck at some stage. And the environment that you're in can't suck. Right?
So I think I think one of the key things is for kids to start to narrow things down realistically, and to create a matrix. Okay, like you said, if they don't want to be in a rural area, all right, then let's take a look at the schools that are urban or suburban that might work. Let's look at what we want to study.
yeah,
Let's make sure that the coursework and the professors that are there are going to get me to where I want to be. One of the questions I always ask kids to ask coaches is, Coach, can you tell me how many kids from your school, from your team, graduate in 4 years? Okay, you'd be amazed. You think, oh, it's 100%. Well, it's not 100%. So that's a good question to ask, just to get an idea for kids, just to get an idea, of what the next level, the next step is going to be. Am I going to be going to graduate school? Do I want to go to medical school? I could tell you that I've graduated 20 some odd kids that are doctors now from Yale, and I'm thrilled because because I need help as I get older, and
yeah,
also in this environment with COVID, we all need some help.
yeah.
But I can tell you that it's, you start to put together a matrix of what you're looking for. Academically, am I in the ballpark? Is there a scattergram that's going to tell me what the likelihood is for me to get into some of these schools? All right. Now, that being said, I do want to say something about the top academic schools like Ivy Leagues, NESCAC, some of the other top academic schools. You get a big hook, what we call a hook, by playing a sport on campus, by being on a varsity team. If you're a recruited student athlete, you do not have to have 1600 on your SAT to get into those schools. All right, it's quite fluid, right? And it's really depending on how much they want you or how much they can promote you to the admissions department based on your athletic ability.
Yeah. No, and then also I think the financial aid plays a part of that as well, right? And
Absolutely.
that's the biggest thing. Like when I'm over, so some people are telling me they're like, this girl's got to go NESCAC, and I'm like, well, A, can you afford it if you don't meet the financial aid criteria? And you have so that's like a big thing that I think a lot of parents have to take away and again, I'm obviously I come from different backgrounds and I didn't grow up in the US environment, but I look at it and I see a lot of people whose parents are driving the bus, right? And it comes down to I truly believe that the players have got to start taking a little bit more onus on their own, where they're going. So what do you see?
Okay, I'll say this. I'd probably guess that at least 90% of the coaches, all right, do want that first phone call to come from the kids. All right, they want to start having a relationship of some sort with the kids. Now, I'll tell you this. Before the new rules came in last year, I had a call from a seventh grader, right? And I know this seventh grader because she's a good player, and I've seen her play. And she said to me, "Hey, coach, I have been asked to call these two schools, two of the top schools in the country, tonight to make a commitment." Right? This is a seventh grader. And I said, "Really?" I said, "Okay, tell me one thing. What's a university?" Right? And she said, "I really don't know." Like that. And I said, "Well, look, you cannot make a commitment. All right. If they want you in seventh grade, they're going to want you later on down the pike. Get your parents on that phone, right? Don't talk to those coaches without your parents." And as a general rule, as a litmus test, I would always say, look, make that contact yourself. As the first contact with the coaches should come from the kid without fail. But good coaches are going to want the parents included in the process in short order. So it could be the second call, or it could be, some communication. Good coaches want the parents to be involved, to understand what's going on from an adult level.
Yeah, no, I think that's definitely, and I know hockey parents can kind of, and you can, when you meet a hockey player, you know where it comes from when you meet their parents, and their attitudes and everything else, and people can hide those things, but once you meet their mom and dad, it's pretty easy to understand what that player is going to be like. So let's just talk about, I think, a really big question as well, and a lot of uncertainty surrounding it with players is, how long does it take, right? Like so I do all these exposure camps, I do all these clinics and everything else, but how long is this process? I'm entering my senior year. Maybe I'm not a Division 1, but I know I'm Division 3. So what is, is there a quicker process because it's Division 1 go first and then D3 goes second? So it doesn't have to be a general rule for everyone, just kind of like the average, right? What does the average kind of process of getting recruited look like for most players in the
All right.
US?
So look, I think for Division 1, I think that the June 15th call after the 10th grade, which is the first time coaches are going to be making in Division 1 are going to be able to reach out to players, is June 15th after the 10th grade year. That's very telling. Okay. So in the old days, when I was recruiting back at Yale at the beginning, none of the kids used to make commitments until March or April. In fact, they used to apply to a lot of the Ivy League schools and then decide, once they've been admitted, then decide which ones they would go to. So that would happen in March or April. but today I think you can start to get a real feeling for Division One about, where you are in the pecking order, by whether or not you're receiving that phone call, where you are on their list. You can't really judge, well, gee, am I getting the call on June 15th or am I getting the call on June 20th? Kids can drive themselves crazy about that. But understand, coaches are busy and they have lives.
Yeah.
And, and they can't just be, they can't all be making phone calls on that day. So don't start making judgments like that, until you have conversations with coaches. Then you can start to really, be authentic. Ask them, where am I on your list? And here's another little tip. Sometimes coaches will say, well, you're in my top list. Okay. So Sam, when a coach says that to you and, you're a kid, what do you think that means?
Oh, wow.
I'm the coach of a scholarship school, and I'm saying to you, hey, Sam, we really like the way you play. You're in our top group.
Well, I'm thinking many kids will take away and say like, oh yeah, that school wants me.
I'm done.
Yeah.
Right.
That's it.
I'm recruited. Right.
But nothing is guaranteed. Nothing's given. Nothing's offered.
So for me, when they say that, until they say, hey, you know what, we really like you, we followed you, we'd like you to visit our campus, but we want to make a commitment to you. We'd like to offer you a scholarship, or we'd like to offer you a place in our school. Unless they do that, it's not a done deal.
Yeah.
Okay. In fact, in some cases, you might be in that second or third group, right? But they don't want to lose you because until they get commitments from the other kids.
Yeah. So I think that's such a big point. So when they say we have this phone call, right, and the school's showing interest in you, and
Sure.
then so let's talk about the official visit, because you can take, how many official visits can you take, and typically what happens on an official visit? Some people have some mythical stories from them, and then what typically happens from a college side point, and how important is that official visit?
Well, all right. Again, in the last few years, there were very few official visits, except for the kids that had already been committed to that school. Okay, so, and the reason is simple. It costs a lot of money to bring kids in from all over to have official visits. Again, when I was coaching in the Ivy League, we used to bring in 20, 25 kids every year, right? For them to see us, for us to see them. We used to fly in. That's a big budget, okay, or a big use of the budget. Well, with the early recruiting and the early commitments, schools didn't need to do that anymore, right? So they started to just bring in kids of a group of the 5 or 6 kids that they had already recruited as an official visit. And it was sort of a pre-orientation at that point. It was almost like a celebratory visit, as opposed to like, hey, let's feel each other out. Let's get a sense of how this is going to work. All right. I think it's going to go back now a little bit, at least. It has to go back to coaches offering their best recruits, their top kids, their most wanted kids, official visits. So kids can take 5 official visits in Division One, and they can take 5 official visits. Actually, they can do it for 2 years. Okay, but they can't visit the same school twice. All right, but I think most of the kids don't want to take more than 5 visits. And I don't think kids should be looking to take 5 visits. What happens on those visits? They have 48 hours on the campus, essentially, to get to know kids, to get to know the team, to watch practices or games, to get a feeling for what the campus really is like. Again, most coaches I know put kids into classes to give them a sense of whether or not this is going to be a good fit academically for them. So that's the kind of stuff that happens on an official visit. That's the official stuff that happens on an official visit. I think we shouldn't really talk about all the unofficial stuff that happens on an official.
Yeah. And again, I think that's just kind of gelling with the team, right? And understanding that player is going to fit in well with the group of players. So that's a big thing.
The one thing I will say is that a lot of coaches depend on their current players to give them feedback about a kid on an official visit.
Yeah.
So, if they trust a current player and they respect that current player's opinion, if that kid comes back and says, hey, this kid was kind of a goof off, or that kid wasn't really taking this, or I didn't get a sense that we were their top school, or we were one of their top schools, that can play a very big role in the future development of the relationship between the coaches and that player.
Yeah. So let's just say, let's just move on from that and put a part where it's like, let's talk about decommitted, right? And getting decommitted and what that means and how do you get decommitted? Like, obviously you can decommit yourself, but what kind of scenario would arise? And is it, everyone talks about the sign of the NLI, is that watertight? Once you sign that contract, can you get decommitted? So yeah, that's kind of a question that people ask me a lot as well.
So once you sign, everything before the NLI is a verbal commitment. All right. So the verbal commitment is basically as good as the paper it's written on. All right. Once you sign an NLI, in 99% of the cases, it's your contract, it's your agreement that you're going to accept the scholarship, or in the Ivy Leagues or other academic schools, that you're going to accept their offer of admission. Okay. By then, which is November of your 12th grade year, hopefully you've got all the kinks out, everything is working out. Now, things could change with financial aid. There's a very famous, I don't even want to get into it, but there's a very famous case of a kid that had committed to us in the early decision process many, many years ago. And her father said, oh, don't worry about finances. We have a big company and I make $4 million a year and there's no problem with it. In fact, I'm looking to support the hockey team. All right. And then they came to financial aid, and meanwhile they had gotten all kinds of scholarship offers. Right. And the father said to me, hey, look, Harry, we're gonna go scholarship because we don't want to pay this kind of money, and when we could get a full ride. And I said, what happened to the $4 million? What's the deal? So anyhow, bottom line is, it ain't over till it's over. Let's put it that way. So yes, did she commit to us? Yes. Did she get admitted? Yes. But things change. Things change. At the end of the day, coaches don't want kids there who don't want to be there.
Yeah.
Right. And kids should feel the same way. Don't forget, this is a buyer's market. The player is still the buyer here. Right. Ultimately, she's got the power.
Yeah.
And I think that's important to acknowledge and to recognize. Okay.
Yeah, no, I think it's good. So, last thing, I think let's talk more about let's talk about women's hockey and what are coaches really looking for? You obviously speak to a lot of coaches, and we all know that whenever I'm working with players and whenever I see, it's always pass first, and goals are something that every team wants. And what do you see the state of women's hockey, and what are they looking for, and what's how are teams now looking to play? The game is changing so much. Are they looking for girls who are a bit bigger or athletic? What do you see as kind of the trend, and what's the big thing that players could do to benefit their game?
Well, let's look at it from a coach's perspective first. Okay. So for instance, if I'm coaching a team that hasn't been very good, I need to get players who are going to be more immediate impact players. Okay. But if I'm coaching a team that's pretty good or trending to be very, very good, I can be a little bit more patient in what I'm looking for. So for instance, my philosophy as a recruiter was always, I want a kid who I believe is going to be great in her third and fourth year. That was just my perspective. And it was pretty good perspective. I think a lot of, that helped, that spoke to a lot of the character issues and commitment level and all this other stuff. That was what I was looking for mostly. But a lot of coaches need immediate help. So they're looking to take that snapshot of a kid who's going to be able to step in on day one and really impact their program athletically. All right. Other schools, kids might not play for the first year, or they might not play for a year and a half or 2 years until they've sort of earned that spot. So looking at it from the coach's perspective, it's quite different on what they need.
Yeah.
Right. And looking at it from the player's perspective, you also need to look at it that way. Am I going to play right away? Am I going to impact things? Do I want to wait? Am I willing to wait? I try to recruit a Canadian national team player, and my pitch to her when I was coaching was, hey, you know what? You're going to be one of the best players in the league, which was true. You're going to be one of the best players in the league. You're going to be the person that's going to be our go-to kid all the time. And we really want to center our team around you. And she turned around and looked at me and said, that's not what I'm looking for. I don't want to be the best player on the team. I want to be pushed. I want to have somebody who's better that I can compete against.
Yeah.
Okay. So I think it's important for kids and coaches to be authentic about what they're really looking for, and to be honest about it. But I think that there's all kinds of dynamics that way. From an athletic standpoint, I think most coaches are going to tell you that they want character players, right? That's number one for everybody. But here's the question I have for coaches or for kids. What does character mean to those coaches? Like, because different coaches will tell you different things.
Yeah.
Right. Some want commitment, some want accountability, some want volunteerism, some want you to be great in the community. What does it mean for that coach? So the simple thing that I would recommend is ask the coach, what are some of the character traits you're looking for so that I know, and I want to make sure that it's right for me.
Yeah.
Again, it's all about fit.
Yeah, I think that's such a true point, and it's unwritten in so many ways for hockey. Like, what it means to be a hockey player is like an unwritten code. Is we don't seek to, we don't have self-praise. We look to deflect, and we look to talk about the group,
Yes.
and we want to be humble. We want to help our communities, but not look to be like shining the light on ourselves. We don't really like to be the center of attention, and we stick up for one another, and it's an unwritten code that no one has ever taught you. That it's just the way that the game is around, and what how everyone acts in the world.
It's a great, and guess what? That's a great peer pressure. So I mean, to be honest, the great players, the further along you get in the women's hockey, men's hockey, the more humble you become, the more appreciative you are of everything that's been given to you. It's just a natural kind of progression.
Yeah.
So if you show that immediately or initially, that kind of humility is going to really resonate with a lot of coaches.
So the one counter thing that I always struggle with, and I know I'm the worst person. I don't like this. I don't like my face being on something. I don't like me to be doing a drill. I like to be the player, whatever I'm doing. But it's the same thing with hockey players. I feel it's really tough when you're reaching out to these coaches. How do you sell yourself, right? Like, because you want to be humble, but you don't want to come across as arrogant. So like, is there something? How much do you go into detail, and do you just is the phone call the best way about it? Like, is it better just to pick up the phone than email sometimes, or?
There's all kinds of media that can be used. Obviously, social media is very important.
Yeah.
The thing is, when we talk about character and stuff like that, it's not what you say about yourself, right? It's what you can demonstrate about yourself. So I'll give you an example. Today, if I'm writing to a school in New York State, or if I'm writing to a school in Connecticut, these are two areas that are really in trouble with coronavirus, right? The first sentence I write to the coaches there is, "Coach, I hope you're well. I mean, I know your school is in an area that's in trouble. You know, I talk to them. I try to communicate to them about them.
Yeah.
You know, about their process, what they're going through. Coach, it must be really hard right now to be, you know, you're not able to go off campus, you're not able to go watch players. Like, what is that like for you? So in general, I think the more intriguing questions, the more thoughtful questions that kids ask, the better the response is going to be.
Yeah,
And,
no, I think that's again another great thing, and something more than just saying that I have a 65% face-off percentage win, but like who really checks that? I don't know.
you know, I give these talks all over the world, right?
Yeah,
About this stuff. And you know, one of the questions I ask is, you know, all right, tell me the one thing about you that coaches want to know. Well, it's the one thing, because that should be something that you lead with, right? And a lot of kids raise their hands, coach, I'm the hardest worker on the team. And I said, what does that mean? Like, if you're writing that in a letter, or if you're trying to communicate that you are the hardest worker, what does that mean? Does that mean you're shooting 150 pucks a night? Are you doing, you know, 3 extra sets of plyos? Where are you with that? So don't tell them, but demonstrate to them. If
yeah,
you demonstrate them to them in some meaningful way, they'll get it. Does that make
yeah.
sense?
No, that makes complete, like, you know, and I would talk to players and tell them about the similar kind of thing. Like, talk about, you know, if you're going to show adversity and say you grew up in a small town with only 10 people, that's adversity. You've got to overcome a lot of things just to get to where you are. So let's take someone that we both know, like Kelly Babstock, right?
Right.
You know, and you introduced me to her and what she was able to do in the game, but coming from a very small environment. Like, and she left home to come to Quinnipiac, and you know, it's a big jump, but I'm sure it's something when you're looking at to recruit a player like that, straight off the bat, you know, she is making so many sacrifices already just to better herself. She hasn't got necessarily the access to the training resources that other people might have on their doorstep. She hasn't got Mike Boyle strength and fit. It's just not there for her. So
Correct.
so you know, as a character trait off the bat, she's going to tick a lot of those boxes. So that's something, you know, talking to your point there, players could definitely be talking about, but just showing, you know, showing themselves by putting them in that kind of conversation, or you know, saying where they come from.
Right.
Uh,
So if Kelly had said to me, Harry, I'm the best, you know, I'm going to score, what was it in her first year? I don't know. She had something like 32 goals or something in her first year. I wouldn't have doubted her, but it probably wouldn't have been as impactful to me as it was when she would downplay it, like, and how she would talk to me about deferring credit to her teammates,
yeah,
and I don't want to take credit. So those are the things that made me want her to be on my team even more.
yeah,
All right. um, but in general, you know, I think in general, there is always a conundrum. Like, how do you present yourself in a way that is going to be attractive to coaches, but without being obnoxious?
yeah,
You know?
yeah. It's a catch-22 sometimes, but I think you can, anyone, if you're authentic, you can find the right balance, and I think people can take away. But let's jump in here to talk about national team, right? Let's talk about, you know, now what you're doing with the Spanish national team is phenomenal, and players who are now even over here playing, which is, you know, I've got a chance to see 2 of them this year on the U18 national team, and watch them play and play against them. You know, and talk about the success that you're having with, you know, a team and a country that obviously isn't known for hockey, more roller hockey than anything else,
For sure.
and which are very good at roller hockey.
We're very good
Yeah.
in inline hockey.
Well,
Very
they've
good.
got a professional league there that sells out, and players get paid a good living, and have an apartment and stuff. So talk about, you know, not, maybe you can touch on the Spanish team and what you do with them, but also talk about, you know, the state of the international game with the, you know, the women, and obviously we know the level of play outside the US is so high right now, and it's growing each year. And what
Every
does that mean?
Absolutely, it's growing internationally. That means for kids who want to get recruited, that they need to understand, first of all, that there's not only the kids that are, in the US and Canada, but they're also competing against very talented kids internationally. But I should make a general announcement. If anybody that's listening has a Spanish passport or can get a Spanish passport and plays hockey at a good level, I want them to contact me. Okay? Because we're always looking and we always keep our eyes and ears open. For me, the Spanish thing is sort of a mirror of what we've done in the past, what I've done in the past with developing a culture, a winning mentality, pushing kids to enjoy the game, to love the game, to be passionate about the game. And my saying has always been, if you love the game is going to love you back. So for us, the limitation is ice time. There's only 9 rinks in all of Spain that play hockey. So there's only 9 rinks. And so, it's very difficult for the kids to get adequate amount of ice time. So we're compensating by doing extra off ice things, by doing stick handling. I have them following YouTube channels, all those things that are going to hopefully develop a culture of leadership and of personal growth that translates into some great things in the future. I can tell you right now, I'm really excited about some of the younger kids in Spain. I feel that those guys can actually play with any of the international teams in the world right now.
Oh yeah, we saw like this year we had Laura Gill, where she was at Rice Prep, right?
Yep.
And then you have Aitana was over in Gilmore Academy, and then not even what's
Isaiah
the
is going to be
right. Yeah, and you just look at Laura Gill, she was probably the best player at in her team this year. Whenever she played against us, she would try moves that were just creative. And I think that comes down to our roll hockey as well. She was doing things, it wasn't, and I struggle with this sometimes, and I know players listen to this, I don't like to dump and chase. I don't like to release the puck, but a North American way is hit that red line, dump it in. But there's no need to do it anymore because the gap control between the defensemen, because no one is lining you up by Scott Stevens, even on the blue line anymore, right? On the boys' side, it doesn't happen. Right? When the puck goes in the corner, if you watch the NHL, the only time someone's rimming the puck is when someone is getting hit, right? They have to make that play, and they got no other option, so it's a hard rim. Whereas when we're giving away pucks and we're giving away plays, it just makes no sense. So, when I see players who maybe don't have the ice time that everyone is rewarded with, there's so much, they're looking at the game in a different way, right? Because they're watching what's developing, they're trying more things, they're out there stick handling, and then, they're not just stick handling just to do it because their coach says do it for half an hour. They're doing it with a purpose.
Exactly.
And to be creative.
So during this COVID crisis in Spain, because Spain has been terribly hurt by this. Thankfully, knock wood, my kids are okay. But during this crisis, I'm getting videos sent to me from Instagrams and stuff from my kids. And they're on their balconies doing stick handling. They're doing warm-up drills. They're doing all kinds of off-ice things. We're doing whatever we can to be as good as we can be.
Yeah.
And I think that's a tribute to the kids. I think that the kids are really committed. They really want to be better. One thing I will say is that, I'm trying to change the style of play in Europe. One of the great things about the Sweden camp is, kids in Sweden and Finland and some of these other international countries, their skill level is actually better than skill level in the US and Canada. On a pure skill basis, they probably have more skill at a younger age than North American kids. And the reason for that is they focus on that endlessly. They're always doing skill things, and they do it in sort of a progressional way. But they don't compete. They don't compete the way we do in North America. So I'm trying to help at least make them aware of how to compete, and to be able to use that as part of their new national identity. Well, I'm doing that for Spain for sure. All right, because I like pressure. All right, and I like to cut down on time and space. All right, so my kids, I think, were super aggressive, and that's one of the things that I like. We're going to take chances. We're going to get burned quite a few times, but we're also learning how to play with tight gap, with super aggressive forecheck. That's just who we are.
Yeah.
And I think as long as we can create that identity and the kids buy into that, it's gonna we're gonna be we're gonna change some minds.
Yeah, no, and what was the last tournament there in Dumfries? Didn't you guys win it?
We came in third.
Oh, you going
We should
third?
have won it.
Oh, damn it! I thought you guys won.
But we had the chance to win it in our fourth game, but we blew it.
Yeah, it was
Coaching.
all.
It was all coaching.
Yeah, yeah. Maybe you didn't know enough Spanish to tell the girls. I'm not sure, but no, I think that's the biggest thing coming out of it. Like, you guys over there, you have the limitations, but something that I always stress is to players here, you have to be an athlete first, right? And then if you get back to the college environment, I've shown videos to girls of players working out. Just Harvard University women's hockey team, on YouTube. Here's their workout video, right? And they're in the gym, they're power cleaning, they're doing their pull-ups, squatting 2 plates, 3 plates on each side, lifting some big weights, and expressing and saying to them, like, hey, it's really important to be an athlete first, not just because of what the byproduct is for your on-ice performance, but from a social performance, like I touched on in the other thing, like, just because you want to go to school, and if you can't do a pull-up on day one of fitness testing,
Right.
that's probably not going to be a good look with your group and you're going to feel like you're an outsider and feel like maybe you don't belong there. So the importance, and I think when I saw like someone like Jimena or Lil or Gil or Isaiah, what they had was they were definitely athletic, right? So by not having to be on the ice every single hour of the day or every day of the week, they're able to explore and what it means to be athletic. And then we were both on the ice of Nikolai Ehlers last year,
Right.
and he hadn't been on the ice in what, 2 months, 3 months?
Right.
Right. And he's an NHL player taking 2 or 3 months off, and he's one of the fastest players in the NHL. Like, if you look at his straight line speed, he's up there with McDavid, Barzal.
Great facial hair. Great facial.
Yeah. But like he's insanely quick, right? And he's insanely skillful. And it's not by being on the ice every single hour of the day. So, I think what you guys
So, and here's the thing: a lot of people don't have the resources. A lot of countries don't have the resources. It never stopped Russia under Tarasov, right, who was a legendary coach. It never stopped them from being creative and finding ways to use whatever you have available. You were talking about Kelly Babstock. You may not know this, but Kelly may be or may have been an even better lacrosse player than she was a hockey player. She's phenomenal. So, and she could have had scholarships anywhere for lacrosse. All right. So the bottom line is, you have to be creative. You have to use the resources that are available, and I think kids that want it badly enough will find a way to make good things happen for themselves that way.
Yeah, and that just, again, it's you're not a hockey player on just days you play hockey, right? You're a hockey
Correct.
player every day, and it's what can you do? So
Watch the NHL. Listen, even on the recruiting side, I always say to kids, I've asked them, are you watching the streaming video for the team that you're interested in?
Yeah.
So that when a coach asks you, well, how do you think you'll fit in on our team? And you say to them, well, I think I could be second line. And you can say, the reason is because this girl, they're better than I am right now, but I feel like I can hang with these other guys and I can make plays with these people. The more you know, the more you investigate, the better off you're going to be. It takes time and it takes homework.
Yeah, but I think if you're following them on Twitter and you're following them on Instagram, or you should be like, even myself. Like I was watching the games. Holy Cross, they played Northeastern when I was there. I watched that game. I saw Holy Cross beat not UVM twice towards the end of the year. And those kind of, you have to take an active interest in it. You can't just say to yourself, I'm gonna go play from Minnesota. Like, if you have no idea who the sisters are, and know how skillful they are and how great their goalie is. And she transferred from UVM. Like, you've got to know every single thing before you're going into that. Like, it's not just a rock up and kind of just say, I'm going to the school, like, and be passionate about it. Be like, where did this coach come from? Like, oh, this coach used to play here and maybe she can teach me this, or I follow her on Instagram and like, I really like what she's about and her life. And
But also self advocate.
yeah.
Okay. Don't be afraid to self advocate. Don't be afraid to put yourself out there. All right. I know that you like this thing, like you like the idea that if you're good enough, people will find you. Okay, I can tell you, I wish that was the case 100% of the time. It's probably the case 80% of the time,
Yeah.
but I know a lot of kids who have fallen through the cracks over the years. A lot. I can give you an example. One of the first kids that I ever really helped out was a girl from Minnesota who sent me some video, and I said, wow, kid's pretty good, right? And she had never gotten a phone call. She had never had a letter returned or an email returned in all of the recruiting that she had tried, right? I called a school in Vermont, D3 school, and I said, hey, take a look at this. What do you think? They ended up recruiting her. She ended up being Rookie of the Year in the conference. So trust me when I tell you that there are kids who fall through the cracks, and it might be because they're not doing the right things, but it might also be that coaching staffs can only do so much and can only be spread so thin, right? 3 coaches are allowed to be recruiting at any given time, and today, unlike when I started, there's so many different options as far as showcases, camps, and things like that. So, all I can say to you is, be proactive, self-advocate. Don't be afraid to put yourself out there in the right way.
Yeah. No, and I think that's a really, really important thing that we could probably wrap up this conversation. But that's how do people reach out to you, Harry? Like, I know you mentioned it earlier on, but how would someone get in contact with you? They want to ask you more questions or
For sure. So
anything about recruiting?
they can write to me at harry@collegehockeysshowcases.com.
And when is the new Florida showcase going to be? What
The new
date?
Florida showcase is going to be between the 18th and the 22nd of August.
Yeah, and St. Louis.
And St. Louis will be the 14th through the 16th of August.
And Sweden, touch on wood.
Sweden is July 13th to the 24th. It's an awesome camp. I hope kids can take advantage of it. We'll make you better. I promise.
Well, yeah, I was speaking. Victoria was telling me she was super pumped for it this year. So, all right. Well, thanks, Harry. Thanks for the time, and we'll wrap it up on there. Cheers.
Thanks, buddy. Appreciate it.
But